Hey guys, welcome to this week's Beast Lab. So for those of you who've seen my IGTV, you know that this week was all about taking the top 4 selling heads on the market right now for face-offs and trying to compare them, because even though I have painstakingly made reviews for face-off heads for every single one that's on the market, guys will still ask me, I've watched your videos, I enjoy them, thanks, but I'm having some trouble figuring out which one is exactly right for my playing type. So I figured I would take some time, break it down in a few different categories and give you guys a better idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each head, I'm going to rank it based on my own experience and kind of give you something in each different category, and hopefully it'll clear the picture for you. I really want to hear your guys' comments. Maybe you guys can rank them in the comments section, see if any of your friends want to look at the link and do the same, because obviously this whole thing and the whole reason behind the Beast Lab is for education. So just because I'm saying it doesn't mean it's law. But it is something based on some experience, so hopefully it helps you. Okay, so the 4 heads, once again, the String King 2F, the STX Duel 2, the original Duel I don't believe is being made anymore, the Warrior Burn Faceoff, and the East Coast Dies Weapon X. So, those are the 4 heads. Now, if you want to know about the exact flex points on each head, I went in detail on that on my IGTV. So go to GregBeast32 on Instagram and look up my IGTV from this past week. And you can see all the flex points. I go in really tough detail about that. And then also I talked about warp resistance, which will be the first category that I'm just going to start with on here so we can kind of kick ourselves off. So when we look at these heads, we're looking at warp resistance. I'm talking, you've taken about a month's worth of face-offs, right? Maybe 4 or 5 games. You have played with it in some kind of heat or some kind of cold. And what I've seen and what we have seen from the plastics and my own experience in working with these heads. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rank them from bottom up on the warp resistance. So we're gonna start with warp resistance. The Duel 2 out of these 4. Now, once again, these are the best face-off heads on the market. So even if you're last place in this list, you're still in the top 4 of all face-off heads. So the Duel 2, I believe, is a little bit more resistant to the initial warp than the original Duel. The original Duel was a lot floppier, but at least with the original Duel, you could kind of jam a hockey puck in there and it would bounce right back over and over again. And when you got an original Duel, what you would do is you would take it and you would just kink it right here so that you would get that nice face-off dip on your sidewall. Some people had some like really extravagant ways of doing that, but basically you would just take it and just dip it, a little kink. Now, the problem with the Duel 2 that I have found is if I legitimately do that and I kink this thing and I take a few reps like that, this sidewall will stay caved in. It doesn't bounce back as well as the original Duel. So this can get illegal very quick, whereas an original Duel, if it starts to get a little too warped, you just blast it back out and it comes back and forth. Here, because they did a good job of reinforcing this, they changed the plastic as well to make it stronger. However, once it starts to kink, it really won't punch itself back out. So you got to be careful of that. So that's number 4 on the resistance to the warp. Number 3 is the burn. And then this is least warp resistant out of the top 3, but I will say that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And let me explain. So just because something warps doesn't make it a bad thing, right? So with the Warrior Burn, this head, you want to start to warp a little bit. You want this to pinch in and get a little bit more of an hourglass shape. So as you take face-offs, this sidewall starts to bend in a little bit and you start to get that face flex because this top sidewall is a face flex sidewall. It's just like the CEO. The bottom one's not going to go anywhere really. This is going to stay where it's at. And you'll see it start to pinch and it'll get a little bit better at grabbing the ball. However, this doesn't go anywhere, which is great to get underneath the ball. However, it does create this weird bend and warp shape that this head starts to tilt around and get. So it is, just because of the plastic, it's 3rd on this list as far as warp resistance. But like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing up to a point because it does help you start to grab the ball a little bit more. Number 2 is the Weapon X. So the Weapon X was designed as a FOSO head. So it's designed to bounce right back plastic-wise. It will, however, start to get a kink right here because this trestle point is the strength of this head from a strategic standpoint. So you'll start to get this little kink here so it can dip underneath the ball, which is great. However, it does start to do that. So it does bend a little bit and it starts to grab the ball. It gets a really nice hourglass shape. However, it's not as warp resistant, even though I believe it's a positive thing. It's not as warp resistant as the 2F. This thing can be bent in a million different ways and it always comes back to its original shape. Some people love that, obviously, because then you don't have to worry about the ball getting stuck. I've never even seen a ball get stuck in the back of one of these heads. On the negative side, I have heard guys who say, I've tried it, I like the way it feels. However, the ball flings out a lot because I'm so used to having that little bit of a hourglass shape start to create inside the head. So this is the most warp resistant head, in my opinion, on the market. However, it all depends on you if you like that or if you don't. Okay, so there's warp resistance for those 4 heads there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go on to something I touched on with the Weapon X head, which is, can you use this as a face-off stay-on head? So most of the market is beyond Fogos, right? Most of you guys in high school, at least you should be, also play man up or play two-way midi or whatever. So we're going to rank these heads in that order now. So the least useful as a FOSO head would be the Dual 2. Obviously, everything about this head, this was the pioneer face-off specific heads. I give STX a ton of credit because they opened up a whole new market. However, the Dual 2, like we said, it's the least warp resistant. So it will start to kink. And, I know personally using the original warp and then, using the Dual 2 a little bit when I was in Israel, it's not a head that I ever felt comfortable using in line drills after I took face-offs with it. So it's just one of those things where it's built to face off. It is very good at face-offs, but I wouldn't use it in the field necessarily when I have other options. So third, once again, actually, would be the burn, because it does actually maintain a really good scoop and it stays relatively wide. Even though if it starts to pinch a little bit after use, it doesn't ever get too narrow. So you can catch and throw with it, which is great. But when I think of FOSO, I think of playing offense, not just being able to hold and catch and throw a ball after the face-off, but can you legitimately use a head as a regular offensive midfielder? So this head is close, but I wouldn't put it above the next two. The String King head, the only reason I put this slightly ahead of the burn, the reason I like the burn in the first place is it stays wide and it has a little bit of a cant. Okay, and what I mean by a cant, it doesn't have a true offset, but it has that feel. And the reason the offset is so important is because it helps you crank the ball harder. The reason the offset was created in the first place was because you had more velocity on your shot. It has a way better feel when you cradle. So when you use a face-off head, it doesn't feel like you have that much power behind your shot compared to having an offset regular offensive head. So this head does maintain its shape well, which makes it good for staying on the field, obviously, because you don't have to worry about the ball getting stuck or even it throwing down into the ground because it stays wide. However, it doesn't have a full offset and it never feels like a full face-off, a full shooting head. It's got such a lean profile. Like we said, this is also designed specifically for face-offs. So it maintains its shape really well. Great job on that. But I would never say as an offensive midfielder, hey, out of these 4 heads, which one would you pick to be a starting midfielder? I wouldn't pick this head over the Weapon X, which was designed for that. Okay, so this is not a true face-off head. It's got a little bit of a wide, it's a little bit bulkier looking, right, for a reason, because they want it to maintain its shape, not just for face-offs, but they want it to be able to handle the velocity of a full-speed shot. The thinner profile, thinner sidewall heads will start to give a little bit as you shoot hard. They'll flop back a little bit. That's just science. So this was designed not to. It has a full offset. It's the only face-off head specifically on the market with a full offset. So basically the design of this whole head was to make it feel like it's an offensive head that just happens to have a shorter throat. The stringing holes are symmetrical on both sides, even though the sidewalls are asymmetrical. And that goes for the burn as well, by the way. The burn has the exact same sidewall holes. So don't worry about that with the burn. But this holds its shape, has a full offset. It feels like the profile of a regular offensive head. So that's why this would definitely take the cake as a face-off stay-on specific head if you're a full-time midfielder. Okay, so moving forward now, 50-50s, right? So 50/50s are changing, right? If you train with the FOA, the screw drill is not something we're doing as much as we used to anymore because it's becoming less about the screw drill on a horizontal rotational plane, way more about driving in with the saw down. So on a 50/50, when you meet on impact with the ball starting higher on the head than it used to, the middle towards the throat, that's what we're looking at. When those two heads meet, okay, on impact, which head does a better job of cutting into the ball? These all have a slightly different way of cutting into the ball. Some do it because they have a thin profile so they can kind of knife down. Some do it because they have a hard trestle right there to stop. But what we have seen on 50/50s after taking reps ourselves and after seeing it on TV, which of these heads in a lock-up 50/50 stalemate, all things being equal, which head would have the edge? Which is really hard to do, but we're just doing our best here just to, for fun purposes. So the least strong on a 50/50 would be the 2F. I'm not saying it's bad on 50/50s. I'm just saying that in my experience, when this meets some of these other heads on a 50/50, it does peel back. Okay, I've seen matchups, a ton of matchups, both at my draw days and on TV with the college guys. A dual 2 versus a 2F. You think dual 2, you don't think a strong brick of a head, but it peels this head right back. So unless you knife in right on the whistle, this head stuck in a 50/50 is not going to be the strongest out of these four. Okay, it can get peeled off the ball relatively easily just because their design was all about speed and grabbing the ball, which they do a great job of, obviously, but you have to pick something. You can't be great at everything. So this, I would say its weakest link is on 50/50s. Okay, so then when we go to number 3 on this list, that would be the dual 2. The only reason behind me picking this as number 3 is because I feel like just its profile is great. The strength, though, is all about this string hole and down, okay, which is a really low spot. This trestle is all the way up here. So if you meet a head here, there's nothing here. So there's nothing to stop it from getting peeled back. So if you watch this head like this whole thing peels back, right? So that's what you got to be careful of. Now, the bottom sidewall comes up under the ball very well. Also, by the way, with the 2F, it does a good job. The bottom sidewall is very thin, so it will cut up under the ball. The problem is on a 50/50, you can get driven back, and this whole thing will peel back, okay? So, and as you can tell, just me putting my finger in there a little bit and pushing on it, this is kind of stuck there now. So you just got to be careful on a 50/50. You got to be able to have your way and feel this out and use it right, okay? So then what I did is I put the burn in front of it at 2, strictly because it does feel so much like a CEO. So if you're a CEO guy and you're good on the 50/50 grind, you're going to be even better with this head because this has the bottom trestle going the other way. So as you grind on the 50/50, historically, the CEO from here up would all peel back this way. But now with this trestle going this way, this top will peel, but this bottom side will still cut up under the ball, which is something the Nike CEO was not capable of doing. So the burn, I would put at 2 on the 50/50 scale. And then number 1, as far as a speed face-off head, Weapon X is not known for its speed, okay? So if I were to talk about just speed heads, I would say the 2F has the sleekest design. That would be number 1. I would put the dual 2 at number 2 because it's very thin sidewall. And then I'd put the burn at 3 because it cuts underneath the ball with that bottom trestle, and you can kind of get a piece. And I would put this as a head that if you are only a pluck and go guy, this would not be your go-to. But that being said, when we're talking about just 50/50s, this was designed specifically for that purpose with this trestle meeting right here. Okay, so when you talk about the durability and the ability to peel somebody off the ball, this trestle design was kind of similar to a Nike Legacy. The idea was when you meet somebody, the ball's lined up right here on a face-off. So when you drive in, you're most likely going to hit this spot. And this head peels all of these off the ball completely. So where most heads are strong from here down, this head is strong from an extra inch up, which gives you a good chance of getting to the ball, obviously, and winning a 50/50. If you drive in and you lift your left hand to saw down, this whole sidewall will bend, cut down on the ball, and as you can see, it turns on an oblique to wrap around. The bottom sidewall is designed to cut up underneath, not dissimilar from the rest of these heads. So it's definitely, at least, in my own selfish design, the best 50-50 head, because I've tested it, and that was the reason we made it this way. So that is, in my opinion, the best 50-50 face-off head, assuming that you're not just spinning in circles and you are also using your saw down, which obviously we teach at all the FOA events. So go 50-50. Now, adaptability. So here's the last thing I was looking at. When I look at adaptability, I'm looking at a head that, if I have to judge 2018 and before, right, you're talking about the top heads on the market, that'd be like the Dual 1 and the CEO pretty much, right? So when you're looking at the heads that other guys were using as much as possible, maybe even the Dictator, you have to think, okay, these are the heads that most guys were using. So if they were to jump in and use one of these 4 heads for the first time ever, which one of these heads would be the easiest to adapt to? So let's look at this. I would say, honestly, that the Weapon X is probably the least adaptable, which means that you would probably need like 3 or 4 days of use for you to be like, yes, okay, I'm fully tuned into this thing and I get it. Reason being, full offset. I feel like this right here, even though it's such a strength in all the other aspects, really throws guys off because they get it and they go, ooh, I'm kind of far from the ball. Once you take a few reps, you realize it doesn't matter. But we know as face-off guys, every 1/4 inch off makes us crazy because we're nuts. So I've noticed that when guys use this for the first time in my presence, they're like, oh, it feels kind of weird. By the end of the hour and a half, they're like, oh, okay, I'm totally used to this thing. I love it. But I would say out of the 4 of these heads, it's the least adaptable on the first rep. I think the other thing about it is the fact that this is not built to come in and just pluck at the ball. You are at your best when you get your weight distribution correct. If your stance is dialed in and you drive your right hand into the ball and saw, this thing's awesome because this part of the head's a black hole. But if that's not your style, it'll take you a little bit of time because this head is such a collection of different types of heads. So it's not like you can just pick it up and say, oh, it feels just like the original Dual. So that there's no head on the market that used to be like this. So I would say this would be the least adaptable, even though you'll eventually get used to it. Now, if we were talking about the third least adaptable or third most adaptable, I'd say the burn. The reason the burn's in front of the Weapon X is because if you used a CEO, you can pick this thing up and be like, oh, I get it. It'll be a little different, but you can definitely get to it right away. You probably get used to it relatively quick. I've seen guys who I brought this prototype in to my draw days, and I basically said, hey, who here has a CEO? And I would just toss them the ball, and I'd say, okay, use this head. And within 2 face-offs, they were like, okay, I get it. It's similar. I can get used to this pretty quick. So if you used a CEO, then this would be simple. If you've never used a CEO, this is going to feel like the weirdest head you've ever used, okay? So there's a little bit of a difference there. So for you guys who are CEO guys, you can feel safe if you try this out. It's very, very, very simple, okay? And now I would say that the second most adaptable head is the 2F. It feels like a thin version of a Dual, or even if you remember the Tribe 7 Ghost, it feels like a bulkier version of the Tribe 7 Ghost, okay? You grab it, you get it right away. You punch in. The angle of flex is a little bit off compared to a Dual. It's a little higher, so it might throw you for a loop the first couple face-offs. After that, you'll get used to it. So you catch on very quickly with this. Thinner profile, all that stuff. When you first hold on to it, you're like, wow, this is definitely a face-off head. Like, I totally get this. Nothing about it feels weird. So you eventually catch on very quickly with this. I would say about 10 face-offs in, you'd be used to it. And then the Dual 2, for obvious reasons. I think, 90% of guys have used a Dual at some point. If you've used a Dual and you use a Dual 2, it feels exactly the same, except it's a little bit stronger. The scoop is obviously way better, but it's a different type of plastic. So you can't just grab it and start cranking on it like you would with the original Dual. We already went over that because you might make it illegal. But when you face off with it, if you're tossed this after using a Dual, the first thing you're going to notice is it feels a little stiffer. Other than that, same exact thing. So I made the Dual number 1 on this list specifically because we've all used a Dual at some point. So it's pretty easy to just use the number 2 and feel ready to go after the first face-off. So when we talk about stringing, I can't really list these things because they're all great. I mean, you look at the string holes, I know everybody freaks out like, oh, it's so hard to string. Really, dude? It's 2019. Like, you can't figure out how to string a head. All these have a million holes in them. How many holes do you need to string a head? Right? Look at all these. They all have a million holes. I think the entire String King head is a hole. Look, so they're all, I couldn't list them. I'm not a stringer. I don't pretend to be. I will just say this, that I've used all these heads. I've practiced with all these heads. I've been able to do Beast Labs and all these heads. I, who am a very simple novice stringer, had no issues. So if you claim to be a, Instagram stringer and you are complaining about this amount of string holes in these heads, you need to change your job, because you're not good at it. There's plenty of ways to string these heads. So all 4 of them are very good at stringing. Now, what I want to do is I want to take each one of these heads, and I just want to tell you what each one is very good at. Okay, basically give them a subject, kind of give them a label. Doesn't mean you have to use them this way, but it does mean that that's what's probably best suited for you. So if, for instance, you are a hybrid FOGO who happen to use a CEO, and what I mean by hybrid is you can do everything. You do a little bit of stand-up, you do knee down. You're not just a speed guy who plucks at the ball. You're a 50-50 guy as well. You're kind of like the whole type of thing, all right? You're well-rounded. I would say that you're a warrior burn guy. If you've used a CEO before, this would be your jam, all right? So a hybrid face-off guy, speed, power, and a little bit of stand-up. This is better than at stand-up than a CEO for sure. So this would be the head that I would recommend you give a shot, okay? Hybrid FOGO, strictly hybrid FOGO, speed and power, good footwork. You might not stand up that much, but you can. This is the dual 2, okay? So if you can do a little bit of everything, but you're strictly a FOGO, the dual 2 is your jam, okay? It does a little bit of everything. It can do well on 50-50s. It can do well with speed. It can hold its own standing neutral grip. So this is your jam, okay? If you're a hybrid FOGO. Now, if you're a speed FOGO, okay, you're not much of a grinder, quick hands, you like to grab the ball and go, you need a head with a very thin profile that can wrap around the ball and come out. Very good on standing neutral grip, okay? This would be your head, the Mark IIF. So for you guys who are strictly, you just face off, and then you run off the field, and you have no interest in being on the field after that, but you are really fast, this would be your jam, okay? This is not going to hold up as well as some of the other heads on a 50-50, but it does have the lean profile to help you be a ninja and just cut into the ball and get out of there, okay? So you speed FOGOs out there, that's your jam. And then if you are a face-off, stay-on guy, if you're a two-way midfielder, if you like to stand up, you like to face off on a knee, you like to do a little bit of everything, you're basically a Swiss Army knife, especially you LSMs who face off, this is your head, okay? LSMs who face off, out of all these heads, this is the only one that I would even recommend. Some of them are too floppy for checking. Some of them are a little bit too, they warp too quick. This one holds off its warp resistance, it's got an offset, and it's stronger. So this would be your LSM face-off head. Also, if you're a two-way midi. So if you are just a FOGO, yeah, you could use it. It's got all the flex points that you need, but it might not be as enticing as something that's a little bit more FOGO-y. If you're a two-way face-off guy, this would be your face-off stay-on head, the CD Weapon X. Okay, so that's my breakdown of these different heads. Like I said, all four of these, if you go to the faceoffacademy.com website, click on resources, we have a whole drop-down bar of resources, one of which is all of our head recommendations. So we have all of the top heads that are out right now based on what guys use. We have a full review of my Beast Lab link, and we also have a link to where you can buy these. Usually at Universal Lacrosse has some of the better deals. So feel free to use us. Go to the faceoffacademy.com and check that out. You now have full review videos of these, and you have a video right here in front of you, okay, breaking down as much as I could to try to help you figure out exactly what head works best for you. So good luck this rest of the spring and summer. And these are the four heads that are at the top of the market. So good luck. And next week, the next Beast Lab will actually be, unfortunately, about ACL rehab, because it is ACL season. So I'll be breaking down my own experiences with my own surgery in 2011 and what can help you guys get back on the field, and also how to prevent it.